Hello everybody, welcome to our next edition of our Game Changer series. I'm really excited to have you all with us today. I'm sure you're all interested to hear what our very special guest is going to share with us about leadership. Welcome, Fran. I'd like to just start by introducing Fran to all of you. Fran and I have enjoyed working together, at least I have, for the last 20 plus years in her role at Cisco. And it's interesting, you know, when I thought about game changer, it's a concept that, you know, is very real to me, that there are some people that do things that are truly game changing, but I look for people to do it from a place of authenticity. And when I think about leadership and business leadership specifically, Fran is really at the top of my list in what I've observed of her journey over the 20 years. And one of the reasons I say that is all of that time, or for the most part of that time, I've seen Fran in her role in human resources. And for so many companies, HR is a thing that they've got to have and that they lean on to do the work that's needed, but it doesn't really play a strategic and certainly not a game-changing role in the company. And when I look at what Fran has done at Cisco, I mean, even as some of you saw in the publicity material, for the last couple of years, they've been voted as the #1 best place to work in the world. And that all has to do with culture and authenticity. And of course they have challenges like every other company, you know, when you're going through transformation. But when you look at the leadership and the culture that's being developed there, at the very heart of that, the driving force has definitely been Fran. And I look now at the fact that when you think about the way Cisco is being positioned and where it's going, not only is the human resource function a very strong support mechanism in the business, it's actually part of what's shaping them to be, you know, it's their competitive advantage. And anytime you can do that in your function, you know you're very compelling. So I look now at what's happening around the development of Cisco, and front and center is purpose and the culture behind that to make all of that come to fruition. So I see what you've done, Fran, as incredibly game-changing. I feel personally honoured, and I think all of us feel honoured and very excited to have you come and share a lot of your insight around leadership, how you've done and grown into what you've done today, and where you see the future going, both for yourself but also for leadership generally. So welcome, and thanks for giving up some time to come and share with us today.
It's very kind. Thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Fran. So I know, and as you know, Fran, a lot of the people on this call are all avid ID users. They are here because they care about bringing their best self to their day every day, you know, and digging in every couple of weeks to learn more about even a nuance that could help them do that better. And so I know a lot of people are thinking, well, what's your ID, which I've not shared with everyone. So I have a couple of slides I'm going to show now to just show your ID, a way of introducing you this way to the group, and we'll dig into this a little later. So for those of you who understand ID, I know some of you are new to ID today, we represent it in a graphic that looks like this, and this happens to be Fran's ID. On the next slide, I've got a couple of descriptors that will show you what it means to be driven up on that yellow drive, which we call the instinct to improvise, and driven down on the complete drive, which we then say that person's driven to avoid that instinct. So you're either driven to use or avoid. And those descriptors there, like, you know, Fran, when I think of you, stretching the envelope, imagining the possibilities, that is definitely you, excite me, energize me, and others. You know, it's not just about you, it's about what you can create for the environment around you, which in your case has really grown from a team to an organization, and now even beyond Cisco to what you can do with global communities. And then, of course, you know, speed it up and watch this space. I just thought was absolutely you. So that's anyone on this call who's got a similar ID or even just driven by that improvised drive probably relates to those characteristics. And then with the avoid complete, it's all about, you know, not following a predetermined, predictable path, but blazing your own trail. And not only doing that, but can we get started like right now? And can we see results like right now? There's a real impatience about that avoid complete drive, which is why I put the "are we there yet" piece. So when we tie all that together on the next slide, this is just a way of maybe keeping Fran's leadership style in your mind as she goes through and talks about, you know, her experiences today. It's all about creating innovative opportunities that cause people to grow. So it's not just the result that you're after, it's who you've got to become in order to get that result. And when people can discover more potential, more capability within themselves through the experience of what you help create, that's what brings the fulfillment for someone driven by that improvised drive. So even though some of the results look impressive, and they're good and they're exciting, but it's who we have to become along the way that really drives someone with this type of ID. So, Fran, I think you're sort of sitting in the ideal role for someone like this, and you've helped shape that. So, with that, I don't know, Fran. First of all, we'll dig into this a little later. Does that feel like it resonates? Is there anything you want to share? Or
yeah, it does. There are elements of it that make me laugh because when you understand your ID and then you see it play out again and again, it's pretty funny. But for me, that excitement that I build about the journey, something that I've always loved is when someone says, hey, this can't be done or it's never been done. That is like the worst thing you can tell me because I will figure out how to do it. But absolutely. And understanding not only kind of what drives me, but drives others around me has been just a huge unlock, as you know.
Yeah. Well, let's move into the body of today's conversation. And maybe a way to start, Fran, is just to give people a little bit of background on your journey, because, I've known you will shift from really CHRO to now a role where you Chief People, Policy and Purpose Officer. And I think there's some real interest around also not just the journey of how you got here, but now why the change in that title and what that means to you.
So I have been on a journey for about the last 25 years here at Cisco. And I joined Cisco pretty much out of college. And I remember I started at Cisco answering phones. So I worked in a contact center. And I always say this, but for me, it was a beautiful way to learn the company and to hear how our customers were rooting for us as a much smaller company at that time. And what I could see as I started was just immense opportunity. When I was interviewing for the role was not the right role for me because it was more technical in nature. And I remember like having this feeling like I was meant to be here and just fighting for this role and kind of trusting my gut that this is where I should be. And I moved around a lot. And it felt like along the way I was learning just a ton. As Paul knows, there were many a time where I would just trip hard. But the beautiful thing I think about my ID is that I can quickly turn that into the learning and then how I kind of use it for the next thing. When I joined the HR organization, I really didn't understand HR, but I felt that there was immense opportunity. And because I had never worked in the organization, I just had a ton of questions. And so I moved around the HR organization quite a bit as well. And throughout my career at Cisco, what I also learned was that awful, uncomfortable feeling when you start a role and you think, what have I done? I think I learned to get used to that a little bit and to train myself to think, hey, that's good. Like if you're feeling that, you're doing something right. And Paul, something that you've always said to me is that if I feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm ready for something at the 6.5 to 7,
Right.
That's when I go. And so training myself to believe that's a good thing, I think, has been helpful. The HR gig was supposed to be a 1-year stint and then a 2-year stint. And what I found was I was just so intrigued and curious. And I believe that there was a huge breakthrough that could happen here. And Paul, earlier when you talked about human resources, I think over the last, year and a half, the whole world has now seen the criticality of this beautiful function and how it can really work to bring our people together and keep our people safe and engaged and hopefully healthy. And so this latest move where I'm responsible for people, policy, and purpose, is really about how we bring these critical areas of the organization together to serve both our business strategy, but also the communities around the globe. The reason that I think this role exists and the reason that I think we're going to see it at other companies is that we are now in a place where no one questions the power of purpose. And I think we understand how critical purpose is, not only for your business, but for your people and for the broader impact you have on the world, and that cycle of goodness brings growth in each of those areas. And so it drives a really interesting question around how do you operationalize purpose? How do you bring government affairs and the people organization and digital acceleration together to drive that win-win? And so I think it's an amazing role. It's one that I'm still figuring out together with my team at the moment. But I do think it's the future, not only for Cisco, but for many companies.
Yeah, well, it's bang on. I mean, what we know, people don't all come to work just for the money. They need some deeper meaning to what they do. And the fact that you're now making that so central to the business is wonderful. I think, and to your point about the last couple of years, I mean, so many lines have gotten blurred, and it's also highlighted key elements like, life balance and the health, the role that companies need to play in the health of their employees. And that includes the mental health and well-being, which is very purpose-based. So kudos to you, Fran, and kudos to Cisco for doing that. So in your journey, I mean, I think you've had you've had an incredible career to me, looking at what you've accomplished. And you're incredibly talented at what you do. Have there been some key things that you've lent on? Like, there's also so many learnings, there's so many principles, but have there been some key tenets that you found have really served you well as a leader?
Yeah, I think what I love is how those key tenets keep coming back up, but in different ways or at a greater scale. So early on, the key tenet was really take care of your people. It was help them to be the best that they can be. And in the beginning, that was really, I'm smiling a little bit because it was fun and I was learning a ton. And early on, I also learned to see people and their uniqueness and to figure out how to help them be their best and not your best. And I always remember, Paul, this funny story where I was helping someone on my team prepare for a big presentation. And she's someone that just is full of life, and if she's not laughing a ton, it's just not authentically her. And so I'm prepping her for this presentation, and we finished the prep, she presents, and it wasn't what it could be. And the realization that I had was I was preparing her to present like me, not like her. Right. And that was one of the first leadership experiences that I had where I was like, oh my gosh, no, not how you do it, how they do it. And so that's something that I think just comes back to me on a pretty regular basis. I've learned to surround myself with people that are very different than me, that I think make me better. Yep. It drives them absolutely batty because typically I surround myself with a lot of people that are high verified and high complete. And I need that. And I think it's really funny because a lot of times I'll hire them without knowing their ID. And I go, oh my goodness, continuing to bring people around me that just round me out and make me better. And hopefully I have the same impact on them. I kind of see myself going through that chapter after chapter. And then the last thing that I would say is it has always served me well to just focus on the impact. What's the biggest impact we can have? Where could this go? What could this lead to? And if I'm having those conversations with the team, it usually helps me and hopefully guides us in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. And the first point you made, I think that is so true. I come across so many leaders who are even things like their offsites they might prepare, and they prepare it based on what they would like to discuss or what the flow, the way they like it. So if there's someone that loves a lot of excitement and variety, they've got all these punchy topics, but you look at their team that need to dig in deep. And so many times it's a bit of a an epiphany for them when you sort of say, so that's going to work for you, but now what about your team? And I've had many times a leader say, wow, I didn't think of it like that, so you make a really good point there, Fran. So let's maybe talk about ID a little bit, because it's been a product and a tool that you've been aware of and that you've used both personally. I know it's been very significant to you in terms of your own self-awareness, and you've used it more broadly. But let's start with you. And you know, and have known for years that you're a 5537, whatever that means. But what has it meant to you? What are sort of the insights or value to you that you hold dear from this level of understanding of yourself?
So funny, because the first thing that comes to mind is knowing that I'm a 5537 makes me so much more curious and aware of other IDs. And that was really, really important to me. And I think it was in our very, very first conversation, Paul, where I realized that understanding people's IDs meant that I could look at them not through my own eyes, but look at them, again, individually. And so the power for me was an unlock to understand that. For me as a 5537, what that means to me is that I'm aware of the improvised drive. I'm aware that it is going to be a big part of how I'm fueled. I think the other thing that ID has done for me is this awareness of when I'm in stride and when I'm not in stride. And that has helped me personally, but it's also helped me with others, because being able to say to someone, hey, are you in stride at the moment? Do you feel like you're in stride? Sometimes we have these moments where we go, oh my God, no. So what is behind that? What is going on? And so knowing what it feels like when I'm playing true to my ID, right, and then when there's a drag on that, has been good. And then I ask myself questions around, okay, what's behind that? And then if I'm really stumped, I'll call you sometimes and go, okay, help me. There's something here that's weighing me down a bit, because there's a lot of energy associated, I think, with my ID.
Right. So when you think about, I know that you're someone that loves all of anything that's new and exciting and so on, but there are also roles and situations and people in life that don't really match your need for positive. How do you use your ID or that knowledge of yourself to deal with the tasks and people and situations that could, to someone else, pull them out of stride?
So I remember when I had some of the operational roles that you wouldn't necessarily associate with my ID. For me, what I had to do in that situation, and especially with teams that were a little bit different, was we'd all get focused on the metrics or the measures. And so for the team, I could be clear about the journey and where we're going. And for me, the turnaround was the part that really helped me to play to my strengths, while ensuring that I was creating the path that worked for all of us. And a lot of times it's just getting really tangible about what does it look like? How do we know that we're getting there? These conversations around what does success look like has been a bridge, I think, for different styles. And then the other thing is, I think, just calling the fact that when I'm working with the team where my approach or idea is so different, to say, okay, I know I'm going to drive you crazy here. So let's figure out in these moments where you need more or different, how do we want to have that conversation? But I think some levity about our IDs is helpful as well.
Always. Yeah. Fran, let's shift and talk about the future of leadership.
Yeah.
And where is it going? Because leadership, in some respects, like many things in life, there's common threads that stand the test of time, and the way we show up and lead, being on our game, being at our best, the influence that we have across people in our world. I mean, those things are always there. But when you think particularly about the new dimensions of your role and where you see leadership going in the future, what do you see? Because I know a lot of people have joined today because I think they're very interested to hear from someone in your position where you see leadership evolving to.
So I think one of the biggest places that leadership is evolving to. And I think so many people, and I'm sure the folks that are listening already do this and believe this, is that leadership is about how we see the full person, how we help our people be the absolute best they can be, not for Cisco, but for themselves and for their life. And I think what it means is that there's a connection. And again, it goes back to this understanding of each person being unique and differentiated that I think is really important. It's funny because one of the things that I think a lot about is that when I was a young girl, I remember my father would have people from his team over for dinner a lot. And I remember he'd be talking to them about, like he would say to them, okay, you need to save up your money so that you can put a down payment on a house. My dad was a grocery store manager, and he cared for his people so much. And I think there was a period of time in leadership that if you were talking to someone about how you wanted to help them get their first house, or talking to them about their kids or an issue that they're having, there would have been a point where that was seen to be inappropriate. Like, we don't have those conversations. And so I do think leadership is so much more personal than ever before, and that we have to see one another. The second thing that I would say is that I'm a big believer in servant leadership. And I think, again, the last year and a half has shown us that we have to be in service of our people. We have to turn the organization upside down. And when you do this, not only do you, I think, as a human grow and develop, but the other beautiful thing that happens is that you unleash your people. And typically they're closer to the work and the problems, and they can innovate and drive. And so I think that's another critical element of the future of not only leadership, but the organization as well.
Okay. And what about for you in that? When I think about the last couple of years, because I know that's really, the last couple of years has been incredible, hasn't it, with the way it's sort of thrown challenges at the world and how we've had to pivot with that. What about for you in that? What have you learned about your own leadership? Just to share and be, vulnerable for a minute with the group. What has it brought out for you about yourself?
So, gosh, the first thing I would say is it's been really, really hard. And I always have felt, Paul, that I'm a person who trusts my team. And I realized I had to do even more of that. And the reason I say that is because as we were going through the pandemic, and especially in the first, I would say 5 or 6 months, it almost felt like one day rolled into the next. And I was almost like losing weeks, and we were responding to so many issues. And I needed to trust my team. And I had to be okay with not being as close to issues as I always had been. And there was this really hard moment, too, where I realized I didn't know the people in the organization the way that I used to, because I moved up and through the company. And what that meant was I also then had to be a better listener. And I couldn't assume that the things that I understood 3, 4, 5 years ago were still true. It's tricky at those moments because you almost realize you have to rebuild your foundation a bit. And so for me, there were times where I just felt like, wow, step back, listen. There were times too in this where I had rolled out a new operating model right as we went into the pandemic. And it was probably about and it was like 6 or 7 months in, and my team was really, really, really struggling. And I've always viewed myself as a transparent person. And the learning that I had was you have to even be more transparent, and you have to be faster. I think sometimes my team, my broader organization, struggles with the fact that I can share something that's incredibly broken that I'm accountable for and that I own. And within 15 seconds, I can see the opportunity in that. And so sometimes this delta between sharing something really heavy and then the excitement and the energy that I find to go there, sometimes can confuse people, and they wonder, like, is that real? And for me, it is, and I have to find that, because that's how I also then navigate through.
That's a great point, because here we are talking about authenticity, and yet in the very sharing of being authentic, like you share something that's broken because you think, well, that's being transparent, but in sharing it, because you're wired the way you are, it starts to excite you, the brokenness and the possibility. So you go there in a heartbeat, which makes people that aren't wired like that, they think, well, you clearly don't get the gravity of this situation then, because look at you, you're already off and gone, you know.
Yeah, but it's funny, like that turn has to happen for me to then kind of get clear about the get well, the plan. And so right. Remembering that, and remembering that sometimes I have to acknowledge that I didn't as I went through that. And it makes people sometimes think, she doesn't know, or she doesn't, or she's way too positive.
Right.
And
right.
That's who I am.
Yeah, where's the truth in that? And I think that's a great point. I mean, all of us with our respective leadership styles and strengths, there's normally something that we have to hold on to and stay really conscious of almost through our entire career. Through every performance review, it comes up as conversation where you get feedback. So we go, oh, there it is again. You know, I think you've just raised something that is a great example of, no matter how intentional you are, no matter how much you try and keep it front of mind, by you just being you and doing what's natural to you, which is, true to your ID, there's a very great strength about that can excite an organization. And on the flip side, it can also cause not just frustration, but it erodes the very authenticity that you are actually bringing to the table. It's a really interesting conundrum, but we've all got it. I think it's good for all of us to know, well, I might have one that's different to you, but I've got one, or at least one, and digging in and finding it, understanding that is key to being a great leader. So good on you. Thanks for sharing that, Fran. I think that's really insightful. In a minute, we're going to move to a broader Q&A to bring some others onto the screen to share their questions. Just as we're doing that and bring those people up so you can actually see them, Fran, and there might be some chat questions that people would like to, we can see and respond to as well. Is there a final message that you'd like to just share from your own experience as a leader, and you think about where we're going into the future? Is there something you'd want to, think of a young, out of college, a young Fran Katsoudas from 25 years ago, who's looking at where you've gotten to and feels somewhat overwhelming in this current age? What would you say is the simple steps to get started on that journey of leadership?
What I would say, whenever I get this question, I always laugh, because I think what I would have told myself 25 years ago is it's going to be just fine. And what I mean by that is we don't have to have it figured out. I think that we do have to ensure that we know ourselves, that we are as self-aware as possible, that we surround ourselves with good people, with people that will tell us the truth, and that we ensure that we're playing in companies and in roles that allow us to be true to our strengths and that which drives us. And when you think about it that way, roles and titles and organizations become secondary. I never said I would love to lead an HR organization. I'd love to be the lead of purpose. I allowed myself to be open to getting there. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves. And so what I would say is, it is a journey. And all of us will look at it in different ways, and we should. And if you feel passionate and the people around you see you, I think you're going to be okay.
Good on you, Fran. Good on you. So, some of my kids have dialed in to listen to you today, and I'm sure they'd even take something from that. So thank you. Thank you. So let's invite our panel that have kindly agreed to sort of come on and ask some questions. For the way we work with technology, we can't have everyone on, but we've just got some people here to just maybe ask questions that might be representative of what other people are thinking as well, Fran. and to have some time with you to have their own conversation. So I know a couple of you sent me questions in advance, and I might just start with one, or at least invite Lynn Elgood. I thought one of the ones that you asked, if you're on the call, if you'd like to ask Fran, because in your current role, I think you're in a similar role, or at least in an L&D, OD type role. Are you there, Lynn?
Yes, I am. I'm just getting...
We can't see you, just so you know, and you're a little bit quiet.
Happy to jump in, Paul, if you want to wait for Lynn.
Okay, go. Thanks, Jackie.
Cool.
Nice
yeah, likewise. So Fran, thank you so much for sharing. That was really insightful, and I could recognize some of what I was hearing when I've seen you in meetings and whatnot. So thank you for that. And as Paul knows, I'm on the ID journey with my team. A couple of weeks ago, we all did a session together, and it was incredibly powerful on a number of notes. But I wanted to maybe just ask you a question sort of back to you, which I think could help me and some of the other people on the call. When you talked about, the impact that you can make and, where this could go and what it could be. I mean, I've seen you in meetings, and actually sometimes that energy comes out, and then sometimes you actually contain it quite well. But I love it, by the way, when it comes out. And so the question I had is, how do you find the balance between the energy and the possibility, the art of the possible and the imagine of it all, and then the practicality of how you do that with your team and at Cisco? Because from where I sit, you manage that well, but I'm sure it's not as easy as it looks.
It is managed because I know that in every scenario, the what is possible isn't what we need. And what I try to do, Jackie, is I try to question myself as I go into a session, like, what does the team need most at this moment? And sometimes it is the let's dream conversation. We've been having some fun conversations together on purpose where I'm like in that mode. But sometimes what the team needs is focus on accountability, focus on the project, discussion about what's not working, where I pull some of that behind. And so I try to do my best to ask myself, what does the team need? And at the same time, I have to be authentic. And so there are times where I go into a meeting thinking that I'm going to play it a certain way, and then authentically I feel differently. And whether that's either a frustration coming out or excitement about where we're going. But the best trick is just to ask the team, like, what do we need at this moment? And that guides me quite a bit as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And just for people on the call, Jackie is the CIO at Cisco, so she has a hell of a portfolio as well, and ironically has exactly the same idea as Fran. So I can see they're like twins here, probably learning a lot from each other.
My sister over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lynn, I can see you're on now, but you are on mute. So just you need to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Good morning. Can you hear me
Hey,
now?
Lynn. Yeah, we can. You're soft, but just speak up. I'll repeat it if need be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's been wonderful, Fran. Thank you so much. It's just so inspirational to see the purpose at such a wonderful high level in an organisation. We're all very committed to purpose, obviously. So I was just really curious to know, for an organisation that is very unfamiliar with ID, how would someone in an L&D, OD position really bring that in and embed it in the culture and just get everybody on board so that there's really wonderful execution of all of these IDs?
It's interesting, Lynn, because I think there are multiple ways. What I have found with ID in some cases is that when you bring it in, it kind of spreads like wildfire, because what happens is you go into a session and you see the breakthrough around teaming and understanding one another. And then many times someone in that meeting wants that for their own team, and it grows. But I think at this very moment, what I would say is for many of us, we are working in an environment where a subset of our team will be remote. And the data right now tells us that 98% of meetings will have someone who is not in the room. And so it makes it even more important for us to be able to connect with one another or to have the language. And I think language has been so helpful with ID to navigate through some of the tough things. And so, when you have that, as an example, I said it earlier, I know that sometimes I drive people who are high verify absolutely batty. But having the understanding of high verify and being able to put that forward is, I think, a really lovely way to work through some of the tough things. So I would say at this moment, leveraging ID against the backdrop of hybrid work, remote working is incredibly powerful. I also think there's a beautiful I&D opportunity here as well, which is when we train ourselves to look for difference and appreciate difference, I think we pull it across everything we do.
Thanks, Fran. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Is there someone else?
I'll jump in.
I've got a question, if I may.
Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, Fran. Yeah, it was lovely listening to you. I'm from Sydney, as in Paul. But what probably I'm interested to know is, being you're both and your CEO both from a very large organisation that obviously has got this system implemented in there. I just wonder how do you actually do that? How do you? I know you've got people that are interested and others are using it, and there's inclination to it. But do you have a structured approach to sort of bring it through the corporation?
What I would say is that I think in so many cases it starts with leadership. I think in many organizations, I think, Paul, what we've seen is that one of the leaders basically says, you know what, I really want to invest in my team. I want to get to know the team in a different way. And so when you start with a leader like Jackie, as an example, typically what will happen is that Jackie's direct team will go through the ID process. And what's really beautiful about it is as you move through the understanding of one another, you get to this element of the understanding of team and how we're at our best. And then, Michael, the thing that typically will happen is that Jackie's leaders then will say, we need to do the same thing for our team. We need to establish a different way of working. And so I've seen that approach. When Paul and I started many, many moons ago, we started with one team, Paul, and then it just started to kind of grow. And if I remember, you joined a leadership development session. And by the way, the leadership development piece can't be ignored. I think for leaders, and especially at a moment where you feel like the team isn't clicking the way that you want it to, this is a beautiful insertion. And for us at Cisco, we marry this type of intervention, if you will, with our strengths focus. And so sometimes what will happen is something like Instinctive Drives will get a team back on track, and then it's strengths that really lead the go forward for us as teams, as individuals. And so that's the approach that we've taken. But I will tell you, the overhead is light. I don't think it's something that's been too heavy for us to support or implement. And again, the nice thing is it's kind of contagious once you get started.
You make a really good point there, Fran, that there is an underlying philosophy, Michael, at Cisco, and I think there are some other awesome companies in the world as well that fundamentally the leadership values and the belief system of the key leaders is about people being at their best. Whatever language, whatever tools you want to use, there is this fundamental belief that, and there's a lot of research that when people get to use their strengths each and every day, that's when they shine. That's when, forget engagement, that's when they thrive, And so when you've got that firstly as a premise, then I think the leaders put tools on top of that. And in Cisco's case, there is some wonderful technology that already has people thinking of the power of teams, the power of bringing your strengths to work rather than trying to focus on development areas. And then I think the ID component is a really significant piece around how do you do all that in stride. So, we've all got strengths, but if you're not, Fran made the comment before, there are days where you're just not as in stride, and that's been a really nice dimension to add. I'll just stop there and let the others talk. I'll talk about it forever. But I think the underlying premise and belief system is important first. As I say, you don't put lipstick on a pig, and I think it's important to have that fundamental belief system first and build on that. That I've seen people, companies that were well-intentioned but didn't fundamentally believe in the power of their people, then our work hasn't really had the same value as it could in a company like Cisco.
Paul, if I may add, hi, this is Varsha here. And Fran, so good to see you. I hope you can hear me. I'm saying hi from Sydney. I can't say I'm your number one fan because I know you got lots of them, but one of the number one fans. So hello from Sydney. And I just wanted to add over here is, the things that we spoke about, your idea. This was such an exciting call. I'm so glad Paul invited me here and I got to know I could register in time. Because all that you said, Fran, it is so true in terms of I've been at Cisco 14 years and I can attest to it. I started in Australia, went to San Jose 7 years and back in Australia. And throughout, the beauty about your leadership is, of course, you are an incredible leader, but definitely you have built the world's best people and communities team, HR team. I can totally attest to that. I've had the honor and the privilege to work with many of your teams, and they've been just amazing. And also, Paul, with ID, it's really helped me. We had done the first ID workshop when I was in Sydney with my leadership team. When I went to San Jose, it was like a huge, huge downshift, right? I was like dazzled every time I was taking selfies with any VP plus I would see because we have such few VPs over here. But it actually helped me to make new connections. I would actually go to my ID dashboard and see the leadership style, even when building new teams, what's working, what's not. So I kind of leveraged it a lot. Again, Fran, thank you so much that you and your teams are building that for us. I truly feel one of my identities is a Cisco citizen amongst everything else. To talk about the question, we talked about being game changer about this team, and you talked a lot about teams, and I see that you're doing it. Many times we forget sometimes is we think about what can I do differently? How can I shine? But being a game changer, it's mostly about your teams and how do you build those around you. And I was wondering if during these times of last 1.5 years, have you learned any new rituals, any new learnings in your leadership style or collaboration style that we can apply to our teams? Because your teams, while we struggled, and of course Cisco kind of shined up as one of the teams who took to this hybrid work, but your team definitely was a game changer. You came up with so many new things and pivoted so fast. So how do you make people be their best and do their best? Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. Thank you for all of those lovely comments as well. I'll bring up a ritual and then maybe Pooja can have it because Pooja's on the team. So there's been a few things that we've done that I think have been really helpful. One of them was so simple. We've had meetings where we go around the room and we talk about what emoji we happen to be at this moment. And it's so funny because now there's like so many different emojis to choose from, but some of them, whether it's, the face that looks like really nervous or whatever, maybe, it was a fun way to kind of talk about everything we have going on in our lives. I'm such a big believer that empathy is a superpower. And having these emoji sessions where we don't talk about the projects or the work, but just how are you, which emoji are you today, has been great. Something that led to, so the last session that we did, it was really interesting. So many people on the team basically said that they were struggling with exercise and just getting out there. And so coming out of that session, right now, we have this fitness challenge going on in my team. And let me tell you, the competition is fierce. I am in second place. I do not want to be in second place. And basically, we track movement daily. And it's such a fun way, Varsha, for us to try to take care of ourselves and to make it okay for the team. And so those are two fun things that we're doing. For others, I would say that one of the biggest breakthroughs for Cisco was, I think, our check-ins where we actually had mental health practitioners and doctors joining us in addition to talking about our business strategy. To me, that is what it should be. We should be able to take a question about stress and burnout and then a question about the collaboration business and where we're going and the opportunities back to back, because that's what a company is about when you're people first. So I think that's something that has been a differentiator for us as well. But Pooja, it'd be great to hear what you have.
It's so great to be here, Fran. And I have the privilege of working for Fran and being part of her leadership team. And it is just an incredible honor. And I'm learning a ton. And I love your ID, Fran, because I'm similar to you. So I'm like, thank God you have the ID you have. I also I can relate. I have a lot of verifiers on my team. I love the rituals, the emoji check-ins, and the company check-ins, I think have been a game changer. As I've talked to friends and peers outside of the company, it is a game changer. I had a question for you, Fran, which is around what you talked about servant leadership and service leadership and the importance of that and how you view that as critical to leadership. How do you know if somebody's exhibiting service leadership, servant leadership?
They have people following them when they do. I think typically great servant leaders are always representing the needs of their team, advocating for their teams. Varsha, I think you said it well, that it's about the team and not the individual. And Pooja, I think we're very fortunate because we get to see on a regular basis those leaders where they put themselves second, third, fourth, fifth, and first is really about their team. So I think the way that it shows up is really followership. I think the other way that it shows up is getting a sense for the way in which they support the other team members. I remember a leader once told me that you can assess the strength of a team around the way they handle budget. And I think the meaning there was how transparent you are and talent reviews, because those are the two hardest things as a team. And I think servant leaders also show up in service of what's best for their peers and for the broader team. And so I think that's always a test for us as well.
Great answer. Yeah, I remember you're the one who taught me, Fran, about, when you go into a room and you're floating all other boats, and, by you being yourself, are you dominating and sucking oxygen, or are you actually wind beneath wings that allows other people to shine? And it's a lot of it comes down to just where your head is at and what you choose to focus on. But I think when you choose to focus on floating all the other boats, it just changes the way you show up, and that is a part of servant leadership.
Funny, Paul, I don't know if I shared this with you. I remember a leader early on telling me, the more you just give away credit, the more that you do that, the more powerful you will be. And that really stayed with me, because I think sometimes when you're worried about how you're doing, you almost feel like you have to make sure that your leader knows what things they can attribute to your leadership or your work. And it was really nice because she broke me of that way of thinking.
Right.
And she said, just keep giving it away. And I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, well, there's more where that came from. Jim, you raised an interesting question with me you sent through, I think, yesterday, which I thought was a great question, particularly for someone like with Fran and her leadership style. Would you mind asking that, or maybe even speak to it if you want to, but love to hear it.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Hi, Fran. Really enjoying hearing you speak. Love what you say. I'm based in Melbourne, and I work with a lot of leaders as a business advisor. And I see again and again that many leaders feel they have to be right all the time, and they feel they have to put on a certain sort of persona and an act in the workplace. And given that the world is changing so fast, and you've alluded to this already, I'd like to know how you, as a leader, deal with those sort of moments of self-doubt where you don't know the answer and you're particularly feeling uncertain at that point in time. How do you deal with that?
Interesting, Jim, because I think early in my career, I had an experience where I was a leader of a team where I was by far the least knowledgeable and the least experienced. And so I always say I was so lucky to have that, because what it did for me was it allowed me to be comfortable with the fact that you can be a leader and bring value even if you don't know the most. And so that was really hard and powerful at the same time. The harder part of your question is really, what do you do when you feel self-doubt and in these moments where you trip. Typically what I do in those moments is I go to my truth tellers. And I'm fortunate, I have at least 3 or 4 around me. They're not only truth tellers, but like truth hitters. Like they will make sure that I understand the context that perhaps I don't see, or say, yeah, Fran, like you're missing this, or that's an issue. And I need that. Sometimes I just need to talk things through 2, 3, or 4 times before it clicks for me around how I'm going to move forward. Once it clicks for me, Jim, around, okay, this is the problem that I have, or this is what I have to address, then typically what I'll try to do is be really overt in then addressing it. And I work hard to try to also address the vulnerability part of it too, if I can. And that's been a journey and something that's harder for me sometimes. And it's harder for me, 1, because I transitioned so quickly to opportunity, and 2, I think I grew up a little bit with the belief that there's certain things you keep behind the wall a little bit. And so I think the biggest gift that I can give to my team is letting them know those places where I have doubts, or those places where I feel weak, because then I'm giving them permission to do the same. But it's not easy. It's something that I would say I still work on.
Thank you. I love the concept of truth tellers. That's fantastic. Finding truth tellers around you. I think it's really powerful. Thank you, Fran. It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Someone else have a question?
Yeah, Paul. Hello, Fran. It's Greg from Sydney. I think of your ID 5537, and I think of the energy you have to new direction and to make a difference and so forth. And I'm wondering how you balance that with not getting too far ahead of your team and knowing when you've changed direction too fast for them, or you've got a great new idea and they take just anything coming out of your mouth as an order to do it, and you go, hell, I was just floating that. I didn't want to really do that yet. How do you sort of do those two things, rein them in when they go too much trying to serve you, but also let them catch up with you because you're a comet, and they can't ride the tail really well?
Yeah, it's so funny, Greg, because all of those are true. And then, so I'll answer, and then Pooja can tell us the truth about the two. But so it's funny. I realize now that I've been in role for so long that I have to tell people it's okay to challenge one of my ideas. I just had a one-on-one with someone today, and I said, listen, I think this is a good idea, but I'm open to being proven wrong. So feel free to challenge it. And then the other thing that I'll sometimes say is, listen, I think I care more about, what it is than how we get there. So if there's a better how, tell me, right? So that people don't take something that I say as the thing. And it caught me off guard, over the last couple of years, the Fran says a little bit. So I'm very open. On the other piece around how do you try not to get too far ahead, that's hard for me. And what I try to do is really temper that. What I do is I say things like, hey, let's land these first 2. And when we land them, here's the thing I want to talk about next. So I'm planting the seed around what we're going to go to, but I'm acknowledging the fact that if we have too many balls in the air, let's go ahead and just, work with what we have before we add another one. And then the hardest part as a leader is that I think our role is to push beyond what we believe we can do a little bit. It's funny, there was someone who just left the company a little bit ago. And she was someone that always said, come on, Fran, that's a little too much or whatever it is. So she's now off and she's a CPO, Chief People Officer at another company. And she's like, the team is telling me they can't do it. And we both started laughing really hard. And so, I think as leaders, we have to push. But with my idea, I have to be thoughtful. I have to engage others. Chances are anything I think of, my teams are executing. So they have to own a big part of the decision because they're going to own the execution.
I don't know if you use this trick, but when you're talking to people, particularly down yellows and up verifies where they're trying to hold the thing together, my leaders often go to them and tell them what's not changing before they tell them what they want to change. This is saying we're doing this. Yeah. And that to me calms that down a little bit because go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to do that. No, I'm going to do that all day long because I think sometimes people think a new idea means you're changing the other things that you're doing. So I should just start every meeting with, this is what's not changing. I love it. Thanks, Greg.
And that part will be done in about 30 seconds, Fran, probably.
Stop.
We have time maybe for one more question. If someone's got a question, hasn't asked one yet or has another. Well, Fran, I have a question for you, which is coming back to being at your best. When you think again about you as a leader, we talk about the peak performance indicator scale of being on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 out of 10 is when you're really in stride, or athletes talk about being in the zone and being on your game. I think, on what I observe, you seem to show up at a fairly high number each and every day. I think that would be fair to say, like 8 and above type thing. Be interested for you to comment on that. But more importantly, what do you do to be in that place? Because, you have an exciting role, but you also have an incredibly challenging and onerous role where even just the physical drain on you, the hours you work, can be really taxing. And so do you have a little formula that you use to stay on your game? And do you think about that a lot, in terms of being an 8 or more out of 10 and being in stride?
I do think a lot about whether or not I'm in stride, because that awareness helps me. When I'm not in stride, my perceptions could be off a little bit. And so it's really important that I have a sense for where I'm at. The funny thing is I am most days a 9 or 10-ish, yep. Most days. One day I told you that I was a 7 and you were like, oh my gosh. So that's a big deal for me. I try to focus and listen to my body a lot. There are times where I will recognize that I have to slow the pace down. There's times where I realize I just have to shut down the laptop and just not look at it. And I feel terrible doing that, but I know that I'm at my max and that I won't be good for anyone if I allow myself to push past that point. I usually use my mornings as where I recharge. And so in the mornings, I'm listening to podcasts. Sometimes I'm just, it sounds funny, but organizing, putting things away. And it just allows me to just take a moment and then I think, okay, what do you want the day to be? Where do you want to show up? What's most important to you? Sometimes the answer to what's most important is about John or the kids. Sometimes it's about Pooja or the team. So it varies, but I think asking myself those questions and trying to be deliberate before I feel like I'm sucked into the day has been hugely helpful.
Oh, great answer, Fran. Great answer. And I think it's so good for people to hear that even at your level, with all the challenges that you have on, and it'd be so easy to start and live every day to a fire drill, there's still that enough importance on being really present and you designing the day that you want to have so that you really are on your game. Great message, and thank you for sharing it. Hey, I knew we'd run out of time way too quickly, and that's happened here. Maybe one day we'll get the chance to do it again, Fran, but in the meantime, thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to come and share from the heart, as you always do, and be your authentic self. I've been dying to have this experience with you today because I knew you and I have so many great conversations on our own. I've often thought to myself, I'd love it if there were other people that could hear some of the energy and the dynamics that we share, because it's so real, it's so authentic, and it's just you being you, So thank you for doing that and making a real difference for people today.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you so much for the partnership over the last 20 years. I really appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun. Hey, and thanks everyone for joining today for this session. I hope you've gotten something or several things that are really valuable. Thanks to those who asked your questions, both before and during today. And we look forward to seeing you again next time around. Meanwhile, have a great day, and thanks for being here. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.